transforming elements from one group to others, that is called the homomorphisms. Suppose we have two groups, G1 and G2, and suppose we define a map from the group G1 to G2. Now the map has some special property. Sorry. The property is f of AB is equal to FA times FB. Now AB here, obviously with the operation of G1, and for FA times FB it is in the operation of G2. So suppose you have two elements here, A and B, and if we map them into the group G2, just a minute. So if we map them in G2 in this way, that is, suppose FA maps A maps to FA and B maps to FB, then there is a product of these two elements A and B in the group G1. So suppose the product is AB, and since G2 is a group, so you have a product here in G2, and this product is FA into FB. Now homomorphism is such a map that it forces that the AB will be mapped to this FA times FB only. That is, it is a kind of mapping which preserves the binary operation. In the group G1, the product of two elements going in such a way so that the whole procedure of product is translating in the group of G2, that image of the product is product of the images. A goes to FA, B goes to FB, and then AB, if the condition is such on a mapping such that AB must go to FA times FB, then we say that it is a homomorphism of group. This morphism is actually coming from the Latin word morphos, and that means structure. So actually it is carrying out the structure of G1 to the structure of the group G2. And this structure, this homomorphism means it is like the homogeneous structure, that is the product structure in G1, that is basically carried over to the structure of G2. Now there are a lot of properties of homomorphism. First of all, we note the most important but trivial but important thing, that identity always maps to identity. If U1 is the identity of the group G1, and if E2 is the identity of the group G2, then under homomorphism, always E1 maps to E2. How it comes? It comes with the simple calculation. You see that if we calculate in this way, that f of E1 is f of E1 times E1, because it is the identity, so E1 times E1 is same as E1. Now by the homomorphism property, it becomes f of E1 into f of E1. So f of E1 is some element. Suppose you consider that f of E1 is x, that is in the element of G2. So from this you get that x equal to x into x. So now if you multiply with the x inverse on both sides, and then you get that left hand side is the identity of the group G2 and the right hand side is x. And so you have, we assume that x is f of E1, and you get that f of E1 equal to E2. So identity always goes to identity through homomorphism, and that follows from the property that f of AB equal to FA times FB. Next, we note that number 2, that f of A inverse for every element of A in the group G1, that will go for FA whole inverse. That is, inverse carries to inverses. A went to FA, now FA inverse goes to exactly on FA whole inverse. Now, exactly in the similar way, we can prove this, because you see that if you have that F A into A inverse, now A into A inverse is E1, so it is FE1. So you see that, but you have that, but because of the homomorphism property, this is FA times FA inverse. Now F of E1 is E2, that we have just proved. So what we got, that FA into FA inverse is equal to E2. And so you get that FA inverse is nothing but FA whole inverse. That is, if we multiply both sides by FA whole inverse, then you get that in the left hand side FA whole inverse and the right hand side F of A inverse. So though we have started with this property that product of two elements, the image is the uh, product of the images, and then from this property we get that identity goes to identity and inverse of an element goes to the inverses. So these are the first preliminary properties. Now, as identity goes to identity, now we want to know that what may be the other thing that goes to identity. Hmm. So, for example, before proceeding further, we can go for some example, such that suppose you take the group of matrices, non-singular matrices over R, and suppose we map to the group of non-zero real numbers under usual product. So we define the mapping in this way, that this is equal to determinant of A. GLNR, you can remember, I'm just reminding you, these are nothing but n by n real matrices whose determinants are non-zero. So we map to the determinant. Now you see that f of AB, that is equal to determinant of AB, and you know determinant of AB is equal to determinant of A times determinant of B. So you can write that this is FA and this is FB. So you see that the mapping satisfies the property of the homomorphism, that f of AB is equal to FA into FB. Now in this mapping, you see that what are the elements which goes to the identity of the right side group, that is the codomain group. So you see that right side identity is 1. So all the matrices whose images are 1 under the mapping F, so they are going to identity. So what is the mapping? So FA was the mapping determinant of A. So actually this is the collection of all the matrices whose determinant is equal to 1. And you can remember this we call the specialized linear group of matrices, that is the set of all matrices in GLNR such that the determinant of A is equal to 1. In the case of GLNR, determinant was non-zero. Now it is particularly 1. Then we call this specialized linear group. So all these mappings, all these matrices are goes to the identity of the other group. So this is the GLNR, and suppose this is the point 1 here in set of all non-zero real numbers. Now all these mappings, those are under SLNR, those are maps to 1 or crush to 1, crush to the identity. Now this set for which all the elements crush to the identity of the other group, we say this is the kernel of the homomorphism. Kernel of F, and in short we write this is CARF. What is CARF? If the mapping is from the group G1 to G2, then CARF is the set of all elements of G1 such that Fx is equal to the identity of the group G2. So this subset of G1 that we call, that is the kernel of homomorphism. And now we will show that kernel is not only a subset, it is a subgroup. But before that, you can just review that all the things we have learned just now. We have learned that a mapping from a group to another is called a homomorphism if it satisfies this property, that f of AB is equal to Fa times Fb. Now, immediate from this property, we get two other properties, that identity always maps to identity and inverse of an element maps to the inverse of the image. And then, as we have seen that in this example, that which are the elements which maps to the identity, and that is the special kind of matrices whose determinants are equal to 1. Here also, and already in the subgroup chapter, you have proved that this is a subgroup of GLNR. So in general, we will prove that for any two groups, G1 and G2, set of all mappings. So if we generalize this for any group, so if we generalize this for any group, this is G1, this is G2, and this is the identity. So the map homomorphism, kernel is the set of elements which maps to identity. So let us see that it is a subgroup of the group. First of all, you see that since f of E1 is equal to E2, so by definition, you have E1 must be in the kernel F. And that shows that kernel F is non-empty. Next, we want to show that it is a subgroup. So we want to show that if we have two elements X and Y, then XY inverse will be there. So suppose we take two elements X and Y in the kernel. So by definition, you get that Fx is identity and Fy is also identity. Both are identity of the second group. So what is the image of XY inverse? So if we take the image of XY inverse, you see because of the homomorphism property, this becomes Fx into Fy inverse. And also we have that Fy inverse is Fy whole inverse under the homomorphism. Now you see that Fx is identity, Fy is identity. So when you take the product, E2 and E2 inverse is again E2, and so E2 into E2 is E2. And so you see that XY inverse maps to again E2. And so you get that XY inverse belongs to the kernel F. Therefore, kernel F is a subgroup of G1. So we get under any homomorphism all the collection of elements which are maps to the identity, they are forming a subgroup of the group G1. Now what happens to the group G2? Is there any subgroup here under homomorphism? Obviously, the whole group, the image of the whole group is becoming a subgroup of the group G2. That is, if we take f of G1, we will show that this becomes a subgroup of the group G2. Actually, we can prove in general that if H is a subgroup of G1, H is subgroup of G1, then we can prove that FH, that is its image, is a subgroup of G2. And so in particular, if we can prove this one, then so in particular, when the whole group is the subgroup of itself, and then F of G1 becomes a subgroup of G2. So in general, we want to prove that for every subgroup H in G1, F of H is a subgroup of G2. So since H is non-empty, obviously its image FH is non-empty. And now we want to show that it is a subgroup. So we will take just two elements from here, FH. So suppose you take X and Y from FH. Now, since it is in the FH, that is, it is the image set of H, so naturally, X is image of some element of H and Y is image of some element of H, where AB belongs to H. Now, what happens to the XY inverse? XY inverse is FA, FB whole inverse. Again, because of the homomorphism property, you get this is nothing but F of AB inverse. Because F of B whole inverse becomes F of B inverse, and then by the homomorphism property, you get that this F of AB inverse. Now, since AB belongs to H, and H is a subgroup, so you get that F of AB inverse, you get that AB inverse belongs to H. So F of AB inverse naturally belongs to FH. So we are done that we have taken two elements from FH and we proved that XY inverse is belonging to FH. So FH is a subgroup of G2.
Sir,
Sir,
sir, XY inverse দিয়ে সাবগ্রুপ কি করে প্রুফ করা যায়?
সেটা যে আমরা সাবগ্রুপ চ্যাপ্টারে পড়লাম বাবা। সাবগ্রুপ হওয়ার এই কন্ডিশনটা তো আমরা সাবগ্রুপ চ্যাপ্টারে পড়লাম, যে দুটো একটা সাবসেট নন এমটি সাবসেট সাবগ্রুপ হবে যদি এলিমেন্ট এ আর বির জন্য এ বি ইনভার্স থাকে। এটা একটা থিওরি হিসাবেই আমরা সাবগ্রুপ চ্যাপ্টারে পড়লাম।
ঠিক আছে,
এখানে আমি স্টপ করছি, মানে ফর আ হোয়াইল তোমরা বলো যে এই অবধি যা পড়া হলো তাতে কারো কোনো প্রশ্ন থাকলে বল। ইউ ক্যান আস্ক মি এনি কোশ্চেন। We are starting with the definition of a particular kind of mapping, which we call the homomorphism of groups, and the property of the mapping.
Can you show the last part again? Can you show the last part again?
Yeah.
I only need to take screenshot. A bit higher, a bit higher. Sir, a bit higher. Okay, sir. Thank you, sir.
বলো এখানে কি বলতে চাইছো?
Sir, I had to take screenshot only.
Oh, okay. That is. You don't have to take all the screenshots because everything are in your book, first of all. Secondly, if you send me some email, I can share the video to you so you can again get it. So, however, if you want to, naturally you can take screenshots. But all these things are in your book. You can be rest assured.
Okay, sir. Thank you.
তুমি এখানে যেটা চেষ্টা করো যে জিনিসগুলো বোঝার, you try to understand this. If you have any doubt, any question, that you please ask me. We have defined a mapping with this property, then we prove that identity goes to identity, inverse goes to inverses. Then we have then we have considered some examples here and of homomorphism, and we have seen that not only here what was the identity here? Here the identity was the identity matrix. And identity matrix, its image is determinant of I is
I1.
obviously 1. So identity goes to identity here. But here maybe there are many matrices whose determinants are 1. So you can have other matrices whose determinants are 1. For example, for 2 by 2, you can get this matrix whose determinant is 1, but it is not identity. So in this way, you can get many matrices whose determinants are 1, and they are called this SLNR. So the whole SLNR subset crushed to the identity under the homomorphism. And so then we define in general for two groups, that is the set is called kernel of homomorphism, the set of all elements which goes to identity. And then we have proved that kernel is a subgroup of the group G1. And then we proved, then G2 was crying that I want some subgroup. So God gifted G2 this subgroup that you will get lot of subgroups. For every subgroup in G1, its image is a subgroup of G2. ফলে এখানে যে জিনিসটা দেখো, you try to understand that actually it is a transformation from one structure to another. All the subgroup structure, all these sub algebraic structure just translated to another sub-algebraic structure of this algebra, that is this group. That is not only the product of elements, also the collection of the products of elements are transferring to the collection of the products of elements. So this is basically the power of homomorphism. Now you see that another power of homomorphism, that under the homomorphism that we define kernel in this way, that kernels maps to identity, right? Oh. So now you see that in some particular case it may happen that only identity, we know identity is in the kernel, that is image of the identity is always identity. Now if it happens that only identity goes to identity, that is suppose kernel is singleton, only contains identity and no other element goes to the identity, then the power of homomorphism is such, this one-to-one correspondence between the identities will force the whole mapping to be one-to-one. That is, we want to prove that kernel is the singleton EI, E1, if and only if F is one-to-one. How you see that first of all, one part is obvious. If F is one-to-one, then obviously if you have that X go then if you have that again. So if you have that X belongs to the kernel F, then you have that Fx equal to the identity, but already you got F1 equals to the identity. So now X and E1 both maps to E2, but the mapping is one-to-one, so it is not possible. So X must be equal to E1. So because of the one-to-one property, and so kernel becomes the singleton set. Now so this part is obvious. But we will show the converse also holds, that kernel, if the kernel is singleton, then we show the whole mapping becomes one-to-one. So if kernel contains only one element, then we show F is one-to-one. So how we can show F is one-to-one? If we can prove that from Fx equal to Fy, if we can prove X equal to Y, then the mapping is one-to-one. So suppose you take Fx equal to Fy for some X and Y in G1, and then you get that if you multiply both sides by Fy whole inverse, so this side is identity. And because of the homomorphism, you can club them within parenthesis. So you get that this is f of xy inverse. Now f of xy inverse becomes the identity. So by definition, xy inverse belongs to kernel F. But kernel F contains only one element, that is the identity of the group. And so you get that xy inverse is nothing but the identity. And so you get that x equal to y by multiplying both sides by y. So you get that the mapping is 1 to 1. Whenever you get fx equal to fy, you get x equal to y. So the mapping becomes 1 to 1. And so you see that how powerful is the homomorphism, just identity to identity transformation. If this is 1 to 1, then the whole mapping becomes 1 to 1. But it is not, it may not be on to, it is just 1 to 1. So these are the properties of kernel. Now actually the major property of kernel is hidden somewhere in the other part. What is that part? We are just returning back where we have proved that kernel is a subgroup. You very carefully look at here at these lines. Now you see that this becomes very simpler. That is E2 and E2 inverse. So instead of E2, if you have some other elements also, that into the this element inverse is also can make this identity. So something is here that is hidden here. And what is that? We will see that kernel has a particular property that for every element in the kernel and for every element in the group, if we consider the conjugates of S, that is elements of the form Gx G inverse, you can remember that in the permutation group, we have considered the conjugates. So here, if we consider the conjugates of the element S, now you see that this image of this, what happens? You see, this is because of the homomorphism. So it will split into this way. Now this is Fg, but Fx is in the kernel. So Fx is identity, and then this is Fg whole inverse, and the total becomes equal to identity. And this says that Gx G inverse is belonging to the kernel of it. So kernel is not an ordinary subgroup. It is basically an extraordinary subgroup. It has this property that whenever there is an element in this subgroup, all the conjugates of this element must be in that subgroup. So with this property, it becomes a typically special kind of subgroup, that if you have this a subgroup here, this kernel, so it has the property, if you take even from the outside the group element G and G inverse, but the product of these three will come to within the subgroup kernel. If G and G inverse are within, if G is within the kernel F, obviously G inverse is the kernel F, and then the product is in the kernel F. But the surprising thing is that even if the element is any arbitrary element of the group, but this product is always belonging to the kernel. Now this product with this property, a subgroup has a special name, and that is called the normal subgroup. A subgroup is normal if it has this kind of property, that for every element of the subgroup and every element G of the group, if Gx G inverse belongs to a subgroup, then we call that a subgroup is a normal subgroup. In our book, you will find this normal subgroup chapter before homomorphism. But I have started the discussion with the homomorphism. This is because of the fact to motivate you why we are studying normal subgroup. Why we are just studying with this typical property that G belongs to G, G belongs to G. Suppose this is a subgroup H. So G belongs to G and any H belongs to H. we have the property that G inverse belongs to H. Now this property, if I just tell you that this subgroup, if the subgroup has this property, then it is called a normal subgroup. Then you can have the idea in your mind that why we are taking this kind of condition. There are a lot of conditions that we could take. Why we could not take only GH belongs to H or HG inverse belongs to H or this kind of thing. Why we are taking GH inverse? This is because that every kernel is a normal subgroup. And later on we will show that every normal subgroup is a kernel of some homomorphism. That is kernel of a homomorphism, and being the normal subgroup, it is synonymous. So actually the origin of the normal subgroup comes from the structure of homomorphism, structure of transformation from one group to another. So with this motivation, now we start studying normal subgroup, and we will see various properties of the normal subgroup, and then we again come back to the homomorphism. So in this part, I have shown you some property of the kernel, that two properties of the kernel. One part we have shown that kernel becomes the singleton set if and only the whole mapping is one-to-one. And another part I have shown that for every element in the kernel and every element in the group G1, G inverse is belonging to the kernel. And we will define just now the subgroup. Or subgroup is called a normal subgroup if a subgroup has this property that for all G belongs to G, for all H belongs to H, G inverse belongs to the subgroup. Now let us explore various properties of the normal subgroups.
স্যার ওইখানে যে এফ অফ জি এফ অফ এক্স আর এফ অফ জি ইনভার্স যে ছিল, তাহলে ওটা যে জি ই টু আর জি ইনভার্স, স্যার ওইটা এফ অফ এক্স সমান ই টু নাকি?
কার্নেলে আছে তো সেই জন্য এফ অফ এক্সটা আইডেন্টি। কার্নেলে কারা থাকে যাদের ইমেজটা আইডেন্টিটি হয়ে যায়।
হ্যাঁ হ্যাঁ স্যার, আইডেন্টি। ওকে
Since X is in the kernel, its image is identity. Okay.
ওকে স্যার।
So now we will study the normal subgroups. Since these are kernels of homomorphism, so these are appearing normally in the transformation, and probably that is why the nomenclature is like this. So before going to the details, we will prove a result, a theorem, that let G be a group and H be a subgroup of G. Then the following are equivalent. What are the following? There are four properties. Number one, GH equal to HG for all G belongs to G. That is, every left coset of H is equal to the corresponding right cosets of H. Second property is that GH G inverse equals to H for all G belongs to G. Third property is that GH G inverse subset of H for all G belongs to G. And the last property is that G small h G inverse belongs to H for all G belongs to G, for all H belongs to H. We will show all the four conditions are equivalent. That means all of them implies the other. Any of them implies the other. If H is a subgroup, G is a group, the first condition says that the left coset, every left coset of H in G is equal to its corresponding right coset. And then you see that 2 is nothing but coming G inverse multiplying from the right. If you multiply here by G inverse, you get 2 from 1. And 2 is saying for equality, 3 is saying for subset. So if it is equal, it is obviously a subset. So it is obvious from 2 implies 3. And then 3 implies 4 is that this set G inverse is the set of element of all the collection GH G inverse such that H belongs to H. So since this is a subset of H, so obviously all such element belongs to H. So it has nothing to prove, all these are trivial. So from 1 to 2, 2 to 3, 3 to 4, these are trivial or obvious. So only thing, if we can prove that 4 implies 1, and then the whole things become equivalent. So we prove 4 implies 1. What 4 says? GH G inverse belongs to H. What we have to prove? GH is equal to HG. So we are taking an element from GH. We want to show that it is an element of HG also. So that GH will be subset of HG, and then we'll show HG is a subset of GH. And then we can show they are equal. So if it is belonging to GH, so that means that X equal to G into some H for some H belongs to H, because it is the collection of all GH such that H belongs to H. Now our attempt is to express this X or GH is equal to something into G. We want here G in the right side. So what can we fill up here? Fill in the blank so that this becomes identity. What element should we write here so that this equals to GH?
G inverse.
Or what multiplied by G from the right gives you GH?
So GH G inverse.
GH G inverse, right. You see that G inverse will be adjusted with GH's identity. But now you see that the condition 4 says GH G inverse belongs to H. So this becomes an element of capital H, and so this becomes an element of HG. And so we get that GH is a subset of H, right? So we get GH is a subset of H. Exactly in the same way that if we take some Y belongs to HG, and then you have that Y equal to some H1G for some H1 belongs to H. Now again, this Y, that is H1G, we will write that G into something. So what will we write here?
G inverse H1G.
G inverse H1G. Now you see that you can write this G inverse H1, G you can write G inverse whole inverse. Now look at the condition 4. This holds for all G belongs to G. So if it holds for G, it will hold for G inverse also. So if it holds for G inverse, then it reads that G inverse H, G inverse whole inverse, that is G. So G inverse HG, that is also an element of G. So this becomes an element of GH. So we have started with HG, ending with GH, and so we get that HG is a subset of GH. And so clubbing these together, we get that GH equal to H. So the whole 1 to 4, these are becoming equivalent. So we have proved this theorem that for any group G and any subgroup H, all these conditions are equivalent. And then any one of them you can take as a definition of normal subgroup. So we define a normal subgroup in this way. A subgroup of G is a normal subgroup if any one condition of the above theorem holds. That is, you can define by GH equal to HG for all G belongs to G, then the subgroup is normal, or equivalently you can define that GH G inverse belongs to H for all G belongs to G and for all H belongs to H, then the subgroup is called normal. And obviously you can say 2 and 3 also, that G capital H G inverse equal to H for all G belongs to G. H G for all G belongs to G. Or G inverse G inverse subset of H, any one of them. Then we say that subgroup is a normal subgroup. So now you look at the book, that how they have developed this subject. This is the homomorphism chapter, so that will come back. But before that, we go for the normal subgroups. Okay. Here you see that this is the chapter normal subgroups and quotient groups. And here you see that in the book, the normal subgroups are defined in this way, that the first condition that I put there, that H equal to HA, or I wrote that GH equal to HG. Then in the book, it has taken to be the definition of normal subgroup. And then in the theorem, they have proved the other conditions. But here you see a very good example. You see that the group is considered as the S3 and subgroup is considered as the collection of permutations of 3 cycles, that is E, the identity, and 2, 3 cycles, 1, 2, 3 and 1, 3, 2. These are subgroup because 1, 2, 3 inverse is 1, 3, 2 and its inverse is this. So their product is identity. And so you get that, but you see that this becomes a normal subgroup because every left coset is equal to the right coset. That is showing here. You see that if you multiply this by 1, 2, then you get these 3 elements. And if you multiply 1, 2 from the right, then also you get the same 3 elements. Similarly, if you take 2, 3, and then if you multiply with this, then you get those elements. And if you multiply from the right, you get the same elements. So you get that these are the same element. It is not shown that you can actually, if you calculate, you can see that 1, 3 times H is also equal to H times 1, 3, and that is why this becomes a normal subgroups. And obviously for the elements of the subgroup, it always holds. That is, for any subgroup, this always holds from the base A1. You can remember. So H equal to H if and only if A belongs to H. That was the base one. So you see that for every element in H, it always holds. But for the other element, verification is important. So here, this subgroup is a normal subgroup, but you see that another subgroup here considered that E is only with 1, 2. And here if you multiply this by 1, 3 from the left, it produces these two elements. But 1, 3 from the right is producing another set. These two elements are not same, and so this subgroup is not a normal subgroup. So you see that, and then this property, and then it comes to the concept of normalizer. The concept of normalizer is like this. So it may happen, before going to the normalizer, I just want to make one comment from the definition of normal subgroup. From the definition, you can easily understand all these writing of these things are completely very much depending on the non-abelian property of the group. If the group is abelian, then every subgroup becomes a normal subgroup, because if the group is abelian, then for every G, GH equal to HG. So, and also if you have that GH G inverse, if it is abelian, then GH G inverse is nothing but G inverse H, and that is H, and that is always belonging to H. So for abelian groups, every subgroup is a normal subgroup. Abelian means commutative. So for commutative groups, every subgroup is a normal subgroup. But for non-abelian groups, there are many subgroups which are not normal. Just you have seen that one subgroup that this is not normal. So suppose you take a group and you take a subgroup. Suppose this subgroup is not normal in G, but you can have some subset of G within which it is normal. That means within which, if you take G and G inverse, and if you take H from here, then the product GH G inverse belongs to this set. Then what is the largest subset? And that we'll call the normalizer of a subgroup. So this is called the normalizer of a subgroup H in G, and in notationally we write in this way. That is basically the collection, or we may write G so that you can understand easily. Collection of G belongs to G such that GH G inverse equals to H. So this is called the normalizer of the subgroup H. That H may not be the normal subgroup, but there will be some subgroup within which it is normal. And if there is none, then H itself is the normalizer of it. Because if G belongs to H, then obviously GH G inverse, and that belongs to H, because G is in H is in H, G inverse in H. So normalizer, one extreme of the normalizer, it can become the subgroup itself, and other extreme is the whole group. When it becomes equal to the whole group, then obviously H is a normal subgroup of G. This is a symbol, is that means the normal subgroup. We say that H is a normal subgroup, then we use this symbol. It's a normal. So it is a normal subgroup if and only normalizer is the whole group. But in the worst case, it may happen that normalizer is the subgroup itself. Now we can prove that the normalizer is actually a subgroup. This is a subgroup of G. So if you take, suppose G1 and G2 in the normalizer, then you have that G1H, G1 inverse equal to H, and then G2H, G2 inverse equals to H. And as I have shown you that H is always a subset of normalizer, so it is always non-empty. Now, if you take two elements, then we will show that G1, G2 inverse belongs to normalizer. So you have G1, G2 inverse H, and then G1, G2 inverse whole inverse. Then that is equal to G1, G2 inverse H, and here if you calculate, this is G2 and G1 inverse. So you see that G2H, G2 inverse is H. So on the other way, you can write by multiplying G2 inverse from the left and G2 from the right, that H equal to G2 inverse H G2. So this is H. So this is G1 H, G1 inverse. So this is again H. So you see that G1, G2 inverse satisfies the property of the normalizer. And so this becomes a subgroup of the group G. So this is one property. And then some property of the product of subgroups is given that in the subgroup chapter, probably you have seen that, though I skipped this result, however, you can just know the result that product of two subgroup becomes a subgroup when the whole set product becomes equal on the both sides. That you have to understand that when we say that HK equal to KH, that means it may not be that small h small k here exactly equal to small k into small h, but it may happen for the other elements, some k1 into some h1, but the whole sets are same. Now, if it is a normal subgroup, then obviously you see that hk equal to kh, and so that holds for all k belongs to k, and so you get that hk equal to kh. And if any one of them normal, then the product is a subgroup. If both of them are normal, then the product becomes a normal subgroup. And that you can also prove, sorry. That you can also prove in a very simple way. You see that if you take any element G, then GHK, since H is normal, it is HGK. And since K is normal, this becomes GK is KG. So you see that GHK is equal to HKG. So HK is a normal subgroup. And finally, you have that intersection of normal subgroups and normal subgroups. And that is also very simple to prove, very easy to prove. That is, if you want to show that if H is normal to G, K is normal to G, then you want to show that H intersection K is normal to G. So suppose you take any G belongs to G, and then you take any X belongs to H intersection K, and then H is a normal subgroup, X is an element of H, so GH G inverse belongs to H. Similarly, X is an element of K, so GH G inverse belongs to K because K is a normal subgroup. So this element belongs to H and belongs to K. So this element belongs to H intersection K. And so you have that H intersection K is a normal subgroup. So intersection of normal subgroups are always normal subgroups. So these are some properties here. After that, okay, after that here the quotient group comes. Quotient group I will tell you later. Now there are some sufficient conditions to be a normal subgroup. And here we will see that there are a lot of sufficient conditions by which you can get when a subgroup becomes normal. one of them is saying that when the index of a subgroup is 2, then it is normal. Acha, before that, I again can stop for a minute and you can ask me what we have studied. If you have anything to ask, you can ask me. Or if you want to repeat me anything, you can tell me also.
Hello, sir.
বলো।
Sir, can you repeat the normalizer part once? Only the normalizer part.
আচ্ছা। Normalizer is kind of a subgroup. Normalizer is kind of a subset such that within which H is normal. Oh, very good thing. You asked me to do this because I forgot to do one thing. That normalizer is basically the largest subgroup within which H is normal. Because if we have, suppose, any other subgroup K. So suppose K is a subgroup such that H is a subset of K, and not only that, H is normal in K, and K is a subgroup of G. Then we can show that K is a subset of the normalizer. This is very easy to prove because since H is within K, so for any K belongs to K, you have that K capital H, K inverse is equal to H because H is normal in K. And that gives by the definition that K belongs to the normalizer. So normalizer is the largest subgroup within which H is normal. So the normalizer has two extremes. It can be, in worst case, it can be H, and in the best case, it is G. In that case, H is a normal subgroup of G. And then we have shown that it is a subgroup in this way, that because of these two conditions, you see that every H will satisfy this, because if G1 is in H, then all these three elements are in H, and then it is obviously H. But for other elements, if you calculate that G1, G2 inverse, and then with this thing, then after this calculation, you see that this equals to H, and then this equals to H. So G1, G2 inverse belongs to the normalizer whenever জায়গাটা চলে গেল। দাঁড় ধরা যাচ্ছে না। যাই হোক, whenever G1 and G2 are in H, এই পাওয়া গেছে। Whenever G1 and G2 are in H, then G1, G2 inverse is in, G1 and G2 in the normalizer of H, then G1, G2 inverse the normalizer. So normalizer is a subgroup of G. And it is the last thing that I have shown to you, that is here, that it is the largest normal subgroup, within which H is normal. Because if there is any other subgroup within which H is normal, then all such element will satisfy this condition, and so these elements are in normalizer.
Sir, it means hello. So it means any subgroup of a G which will be normal will be contained in normalizer of the group.
না, সাবগ্রুপটা নরমাল না, H সাবগ্রুপটার মধ্যে নরমাল। H is normal within that subgroup.
আচ্ছা, yeah.
Normalizer কিন্তু normal subgroup নয়। Normalizer is not a normal subgroup. Normalizer is an ordinary subgroup of G within which H is normal. It is the largest one within which H is normal. Actually, what we are doing, we are collecting all the G for which this condition holds, the normality condition holds. And fortunately, this becomes a subgroup of the group. Okay. So next you see that various kind of short problems. Number one problem is that all these are sufficient conditions. Number one is that suppose you have some subgroup that x square belongs to H for all x belongs to G. Then you will see that this gives you that H is a normal subgroup of G. And these are nothing but some kind of word problems. You see that how you can easily prove them. Actually, you want to prove that GH G inverse belongs to H, right? Or GH G capital H G inverse is equal to H. That means you want to show for any G belongs to G and for any H belongs to H, GH G inverse belongs to H. Now you see that GH G inverse, this term, you can make some product of
GH inverse H inverse. সেটা GH G inverse H inverse এরকম।
No. The GH দেখো এবার হয়েছে। You see that this is GH into GH and then one H inverse to adjust this, and then G into G minus 2 is G minus 1. So you see that you can write that GH whole square into some element of H and then into again some element square. And since it is given that every element square is in H, so this belongs to H. And that is why H is a normal subgroup. So this kind of problem is rather a tricky problem, you see, that there is a trick of writing the words in such a way so that you can arrange in the products of the elements of H and products of some squares. And then you get that GH inverse. And that shows that H is a normal subgroup, but this is obviously a sufficient condition. It is not necessary that for every normal subgroup, any element square is in H. Okay. Similarly, another thing you can remember that when we were learning the Lagrange's theorem, so there is a term that index of a subgroup. So index of a subgroup, that is symbolically we write in this way. This is nothing but the number of distinct left cosets, or you can say right cosets. Cosets of H in G. And in the case of finite groups, this is basically order of G by order of H. That is called the index of the subgroup. But whether it is finite or infinite, it is just the number of distinct left cosets of, sorry, I misspelled the cosets. So here, another problem is that if index is 2, that is, if index of a subgroup is 2, it is always a normal subgroup. Why? You see, you can remember in the Lagrange's theorem that cosets are partitioning the whole group. Now, if there are only 2 cosets, so one coset is the subgroup itself, and say another coset is, say, GH is here, then you see that what is GH? GH is nothing but G minus H. Similarly, if we consider the same thing in terms of the right coset, so then also you get the partition into 2 parts, H and the right coset HG, and the right coset HG is nothing but G minus H. So you have that GH equal to HG for all G outside H, that is, which are not in H. These G are not in H. Then you get that GH equal to HG. Now for all G in H, if G belongs to H, then obviously GH equal to H by Ved 1, and that is equal to Hg. So you get for all G in the group GH equal to HG. And so you get that H is a normal subgroup. So every index 2 subgroup is normal. In the previous example, you can remember in the S3 what we were showing, that the subgroup, then the group was S3. So order of the group was 6, and the subgroup we was showing E123, that is of order 3. So its index is 2, 6 by 3 is 2. So without any calculation, we can say that it must be a normal subgroup. So if you have any subgroup of order say 6 in a 12 order group, it must be a normal subgroup. If you have any 5 order subgroup in a 10 order group, it must be a normal subgroup. If you have any 100 order subgroup in a 200 order group, it must be a normal subgroup. Index 2 হলে এটা normal হবেই, সেটাই আমরা এখানে প্রমাণ করলাম। If index is 2, then always it is a normal subgroup. যে কারণ index 2 হলে কি হচ্ছে, একটা পার্ট H আর একটা পার্ট G minus H. So G minus H is the left coset and the right coset both. So left and right cosets are same for every G outside H, and for every G inside H by Bed 1, these are equal to H. And so for all G, GH equal to HG, and so it becomes the normal subgroup. So this is a one property. So you see another property is the center. Center is always a normal subgroup. You can remember the center we have proved to be the subgroup. Now we will show the center is always a normal subgroup. That is very obvious because center, all the elements of center commutes with the elements of the group. So you can remember the center of the group is the set of all elements of the group which commutes with all other elements of the group, or all G belongs to. So it is obvious since they are commuting. So for every G, GZG is equal to ZGG. It has nothing to show because GX equal to XG for all X belongs to ZG. And so this obviously implies GZG equal to ZG. So center is always a normal subgroup. And so you can look at this example. I am skipping this, that however you will read this also, that intersection of all GH inverse, it is also normal subgroup. This is the problem, X square belongs to H, that I was saying. Another part is the quotient group part that I will prove later on. Again, another problem that if every cyclic subgroup is normal, then every subgroup is normal. And that is obviously because for every element A, if you have that GA G inverse is in the cyclic subgroup generated by A, then if A is in H, then the cyclic subgroup generated by A is a subset of H. So GA G inverse belongs to H. So if in a group every cyclic subgroups are normal, then all the subgroups are normal. So another interesting and short problem is, you see, this kind of sorry, what it is saying, that if it happens for any two element outside the subgroup, their product is always within the subgroup, then the subgroup is normal. That is the problem. For all XY belongs to G minus H, if XY belongs to H, then it is a normal subgroup. All these are only one-sided. It is not true for any normal subgroup. Then again, this is what problem kind. You have to show that GH G inverse that belongs to H, right? Now, first of all, you see that for every element G in H, obviously GH G inverse belongs to H because G is in H is in H, G inverse is in H. Now suppose you consider G is outside H. then obviously G inverse is also outside H, because if G inverse is in the subgroup, then G is in the subgroup. Similarly, since G is outside H, we claim that GH is also outside H, because if GH belongs to H and then GH equal to some element, say H1, so G equal to this H1 H inverse, so this becomes belonging to H, but G does not belong to H. Now you see that GH is an outside element, G inverse is an outside element, so their product is in H. And so GH, G inverse is in H. So there are this kind of short but interesting, funny, and small, sweet problems that of normal subgroup of various conditions. You will see that when they are becoming normal subgroups. So you got that if square of every element is in the subgroup, it is normal. Index to it is normal, and then here it is saying that if two outside elements always their product is inside the subgroup, then it is normal. The other problem, now this normal subgroup and onwards, I will this is an important problem that I will show you. I will just mark you the problem in the normal subgroup chapter. Not all these you have to do, because otherwise the course will be very much heavy. This is an important problem. This says that suppose H is a normal subgroup of G, K is also a normal subgroup of G, such that H intersection K is identity only. Then every element of H commutes with every element of K. Actually, this problem you require frequently in finite group theory analysis. Many times you have to use this result. If you have two normal subgroups and their intersection is only containing the identity, and then you have that every element here commutes with every other element here. You see that how we can prove this. This is very, again, the word problem like this. We are just considering this expression, HK, H inverse, K inverse. You see, because H is normal, this KH inverse, K inverse belongs to H. Because H is in H, so its inverse is in H. And since H is normal, KH inverse, K inverse is in H. Again, that multiplied with an element of H, so this is an element of H product. On the other way, you see that by using the normality of K, K is normal, so HK, H inverse belongs to K, and K inverse is an element of K, so it is a product of two elements of K, so it is also belonging to K. So this element belongs to H intersection K, but it is given that H intersection K is identity. So you get that HK H inverse K inverse is equal to identity. And that is nothing if you multiply both sides by serially by K and H, you get that HK equal to K. From the right, if you multiply K and then H, you get that H equal to H. Actually, this term is called commutator. This is an important term in group theory, and that terms are called commutator. Because if it is equal to identity, then the group becomes commutative. If it happens, the element this becomes equal to identity, the group becomes commutative, and that is why it is called commutative. Now, there are many variations of this problem. Instead of this HK equal to this, one can write that order of H intersection K is 1. That means that it only takes it has the identity, because identity always in the subgroup. So identity will be there. So if there is only one element, that is the identity. Other important variation of this problem for finiteness, suppose it is given that order H and order K are relatively prime. That is, GCD of their order is relatively prime. And then you see that H intersection K is a subgroup of H and also is a subgroup of K. So by Lagrange's theorem, this divides order of H and also this divides order of K. And so if they are relatively prime, order H and order K, so this implies that order of H intersection K is equal to 1, and that implies that H intersection K equals to identity. So if you get two normal subgroups, say of order 7 and 17, so you certainly know that all the elements of the subgroup of order 7 will commute with all the elements of subgroup of order 17. And so that is a very powerful theorem, because in the group you see that if you do not know the exact structures of the subgroups, because you know that identity must be common to them. So if you have some subgroup of say order 30 and some subgroup of say order 13, and then you know that any two elements are commuting here, that every element of H commutes with every element of K here. So that is the power of the problem and the application of the problem. So this is an important property and exercise. The other is for quotient groups. So now the only the thing that is remaining to define the quotient group, and that is the last thing that we will read today. Let G be a group and H be a normal subgroup of G. Then we define symbolically G by H, set of all left cosets of H in G. That is, we are collecting all the left cosets of H in G. And that we are writing symbolically G slash H or G by H. We consider all these elements, all these subsets, cosets as a single element. And then we define the product like this, that AH into BH is equal to ABH. Now we will show that under this operation, this set becomes a group. First of all, we want to show that this should be well defined, because if AH equal to A1H and BH equal to B1H, then we have to show that ABH must be equal to A1B1H. Otherwise, this product will not be meaningful, because we know that for two distinct elements, the cosets may be same. Now, this is due to Ved 1. We know that when these two becomes equal, when A inverse A1 belongs to H. When these two becomes equal, B inverse B1 belongs to H. But we now need this. So we require AB whole inverse A1 B1 that should belong to H. Now let us see what is this. This is B inverse, A inverse, A1, B1. Now again the word problem type that we have these two at our hand. Now with this and the normality of H, we have to express this as a product of elements of H, right? So how we can make this product? You see that for B inverse, if we want to use this, forcefully I'm writing B1. So I am adjusting with B1 inverse, right? A inverse A1 is already there. That is an element of H. Now you see that this is B1. Now B1, B inverse B1, this is an element of H. This is an element of H. Now since H is normal, you see that this side is B1 inverse and this side is B1, that is B1 inverse, whole inverse you can write. So this is G inverse type, so this belongs to H. So you have the whole product belongs to H. And so you get the operation is well defined. Whenever you get that AH equal to A1H, BH equal to B1H, you get that ABH equal to A1. So the operation is well defined. Now we can show that this is actually a group. And you see that the closure property is obvious. This is also a left coset, and this is the collection of all left cosets. So this is closed. And identity is again obvious. You see that EH, that is equal to H here. That is EH into AH is nothing but EAH by the definition, and so it is AH. Similarly, AH into EH, that is AEH. So this is again AH. So you see that EH or H, that acts as the identity of G by H. Now the associative, you see that if you multiply in this way, then you get that this is ABH into CH. So this is AB times CH. And because of the associativity of the group, you can write this. So you can write this AH into BCH. So this is AH into BH into CH. And so it is associative. Finally, the inverse. And that is again obvious that inverse of H is nothing but A inverse H, because it is A inverse H, and that is EH, that means H. Similarly, on the other side, A inverse H, AH, that is A inverse AH, and so it is EH equal to H. So you see that from it has the inverse, it satisfies the associative property. It has an identity H that is same as H, and it is closed because it is the collection of all subgroup, all coset, left cosets, and it is well defined. So G by H is a group. So G by H under this operation is a group, and that is called the quotient group. Oh, sorry, I made the mistake in the spelling. So it is the quotient group of H in G. Now this quotient group is nothing new to you, because if you remember that when we are studying that modulo operation, suppose A is congruent to B modulo 6, and then you have seen that this modulo operation partitioned the whole sets into several parts, that is several cosets. Like this is 6Z, this is 6Z plus 1, 6Z plus 2, 6Z plus 3, 6Z plus 4, and 6Z plus 5. That is, all the elements are from 6K, 6K plus 1, 6K plus 2, 6K plus 3, 6K plus 4, and 6K plus 5. And then we called all these equivalence classes as the 0 bar, 1 bar, 2 bar, 3 bar, 4 bar, 5 bar. And then we have defined the group Z6 as the collection of 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So here you see that This is basically a quotient group. This is nothing but the quotient group of Z by 6Z. So these are all the left cosets of 6Z, and if we consider the left cosets as the single elements, and if you define the operation, just the operation is same as you have that I bar plus J bar is nothing but I plus J whole bar. So that is here we are doing that 6Z plus I plus 6Z plus K is nothing but 6Z plus I plus K. So that is the same we are doing here. H plus H here into BH is ABH. So you see that this is basically one example of quotient group, and this is nothing new. That actually motivated by this modulo operation and this construction of Zn, which is nothing but the quotient of Z with Nz, and we are actually defining this quotient group in this way, that it is the collection of all left cosets with the operation that is the collection of all left cosets of G H in G, and with the operation that H equal to BH is ABH. So more quotient group we will study later on. Today I am doing the last theorem here. As we promised that every normal subgroup is a kernel of some homomorphism. And when we have defined homomorphism, I define kernel of homomorphism, and from that we are motivated with the idea of normal subgroup, and then I made the comment that every kernel is a normal subgroup, and in fact every normal subgroup will be a kernel. And that is the last theorem today. Suppose G be a group and H be a normal subgroup of G. Then there exists an onto homomorphism phi such that kernel phi is equal to H. That is the theorem, that for every group and every normal subgroup of it, there exists an onto homomorphism whose kernel is the normal subgroup itself. Now this homomorphism, you see how we can define very naturally. Phi is actually defined from G to G by H. Just phi A is equal to A. Because of its natural transformation from element to the coset, it is called the natural or canonical epimorphism. Epimorphism means onto homomorphism. Epi means actually onto. However, so whatever be in the name, so that is the definition of phi, that element goes to the coset. Now you can easily see that this is a homomorphism because phi AB is equal to ABH, and already we got that in the quotient ABH is equal to AHBH, that is the definition. So it is phi A into phi B. So you see that phi is a homomorphism. And phi is onto by definition because you see that every element here is collection of left cosets. So this is the left coset and its preimage is shown. So every element of G by H has the preimage A. So you have that it is onto by definition. So it is an onto homomorphism. So final thing, we just show that kernel phi is H itself. Now what is kernel phi? It is collection of all elements of G such that phi x is the identity of the group G by H. Now what is the identity of the group G by H? Phi x is xh and identity of the group G by H is H itself. Now xh equal to H, that means by Beth 1 x belongs to H. So it is the collection of all elements of the group who are in H, that is nothing but H, because H is a subset of the group. So all the elements of G who are in H means it is H. So you see that kernel is the subgroup H. So that sets up a one-to-one correspondence between the normal subgroups of G and with the homomorphisms of G. একটা গ্রুপে কটা হোমোমরফিজম, একটা গ্রুপের উপর কটা হোমোমরফিজম ডিফাইন করা যায়? যতগুলো এখানে নরমাল সাবগ্রুপ আছে। একটা গ্রুপে কটা নরমাল সাবগ্রুপ আছে? যতগুলো হোমোমরফিজম ডিফাইন করা। So the number of normal subgroups is the same as the number of homomorphism that you can define on a group, and it has exactly one-to-one correspondence. Every kernel of the homomorphism is a normal subgroup, and every normal subgroup is the kernel of the homomorphism. That is the last theorem. And that is basically end of my lecture today. So already it becomes heavy for you because there are so much structural theorems. You please send me one common email address in your group so that I can send you this video so that you can repeatedly look at the video if you do not understand any one part. But what I will suggest you, rather looking at the videos or not, however, now first I stop the recording, otherwise it is unnecessarily elongated. So what I'm saying that what I will suggest you go through the book, and what you have heard today, you just all these things, all the theorems are in the book.